The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sprawling estate in Beverly Hills. The mansion, a monument to opulence, stood proudly with its sleek glass walls and modernist architecture, reflecting the shimmering lights of Los Angeles in the distance. Inside the grand living room was a study in elegance. Marble floors gleamed under the soft radiance of a crystal chandelier, and abstract art adorned the walls, each piece a testament to wealth and taste. Yet despite the splendor, the air was thick with tension, as cold and unyielding as the polished stone beneath Faith's feet. Faith, an African-American woman in her late 20s, stood with her arms crossed, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. Her presence was magnetic. Tall, poised, with a cascade of tightly coiled curls framing her face, she exuded the confidence of someone who had carved her own path in the cutthroat world of Silicon Valley tech. Her tailored blazer and sleek heels spoke of her success as a rising star in software development, but her expression betrayed a storm of frustration. Across from her, seated in a plush leather armchair, was her mother, Doña Cora, the formidable matriarch of their family's real estate empire. Doña Cora's silver-streaked hair was swept into an impeccable chignon, and her piercing gaze could silence a boardroom. She was a woman who commanded respect, her every word carrying the weight of authority. Faith, darling Doña Cora, began, her voice cool but sharp like a blade wrapped in velvet. She rose from her chair, her silk dress rustling softly as she moved toward a towering portrait of Faith's late father, a revered philanthropist, whose legacy loomed over them both. "When are you going to stop this rebellion? You're nearly 30. It's time to settle down." Faith rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a sardonic smile. "Rebellion. Mom, I'm not a teenager sneaking out to a party. I want to choose who I marry. This Daniel you keep talking about, I don't even know him. I've never seen his face. Billionaire or not, I'm not signing my life away to a stranger." Doña Cora turned, her eyes narrowing. "Daniel is kind, intelligent, and comes from a family of impeccable standing. You're being childish, Faith. Love is a luxury, stability isn't. You think romance lasts, wealth and legacy do." Faith's laugh was sharp, dripping with sarcasm. "Wow, Mom, that's so romantic. What is this, a 2-for-1 deal, my happiness traded for a bank account?" She paced the room, her heels clicking against the marble, each step a declaration of her independence. "I'm not a bargaining chip for your dynasty." Doña Cora's expression hardened, though a flicker of something softer grief perhaps crossed her face. "You're turning 29 next month, Faith. How many men have you dated? None of them lasts. You're not getting any younger, and I want a grandchild. A legacy to carry on your father's name." She paused, her voice softening slightly. "This isn't just about you, it's about what we leave behind." Faith's shoulders slumped, but her resolve didn't waver. "So I should throw myself at some stranger to give you a grandchild? That's your grand plan?" "Doña—" Cora stepped forward, her movements deliberate, and placed an envelope on the glass coffee table. The sound of paper against glass was a quiet thunderclap in the tense silence. "I'm giving you a choice, Faith. Suppose marriage to Daniel isn't what you want, fine. But I need a grandchild. You have 7 months. By the end of the year, you must be pregnant." Faith's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Wait, what? Pregnant by the end of the year? You're serious?" "I am," Doña Cora replied, her tone unyielding. "If you give me a grandchild, you'll have your freedom. No marriage, no Daniel, just one child, and I'll release the trust fund $10 million. You can live as you please. But if you fail, the wedding is set for October." Faith stared at the envelope, her mind racing. Inside, she knew were documents outlining terms and conditions, as if her life could be reduced to a contract. $10 million for a baby, Mom. You sound like you're casting for a reality show. America's next top sperm donor. Doña Cora's lips twitched, but she didn't smile. "Call it what you want, Faith. I'm sponsoring this. If it takes paying for the right donor, so be it. But I want a quality child, healthy, intelligent, preferably attractive. I won't have a grandchild with questionable lineage." Faith sank onto the couch, the weight of her mother's words pressing down on her. "Do you even hear yourself? This is wild." Doña Cora sat beside her, her voice softening further, almost pleading. "This isn't about money, Faith. Your father and I built this empire for a purpose. What's it all for if there's no one to inherit it? I want to hold my grandchild before I'm gone." "Is that so much to ask?" Faith's chest tightened. For the first time, she saw the vulnerability behind her mother's steely facade, the longing for a connection to the past, to her late husband. She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I can't do this? Getting pregnant isn't like flipping a switch. You'll have the best doctors, Doña Cora replied, her tone firm but reassuring. IVF natural, whatever you choose, just don't waste time. Every month counts. Faith looked into her mother's eyes, searching for answers. She saw not just pressure, but a deep unspoken grief, a widow's need to preserve a legacy. If I do this, Faith said slowly, I get to choose the donor. No interference from you. And if it gets too much, you back off. Doña Cora nodded, a rare smile breaking through. Of course. But make sure he's exceptional, healthy, intelligent, and attractive. I won't have an ugly grandchild. Faith groaned, though a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. This is so messed up. You're free to say no, Doña Cora said, standing. But the wedding plans are in motion. October, Faith, either you're pregnant or walking down the aisle with Daniel. Faith leaned back, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. God, how am I going to explain this to Prenny? Hey girl, I'm seeking a sperm donor, preferably hot and with a high IQ. Doña Cora chuckled, a rare sound. Just don't post it on Instagram, darling. She paused, her expression softening. I'm doing this because I know you have dreams, Faith. I don't want to force you into a marriage you don't want. But I need this for our family. Faith's heart softened, though her resolve remained. Okay, Mom, I'll do it. But on my terms. Doña Cora's eyes widened, but she suppressed a smile. Name your terms. First, I choose the donor. Second, you stay out of it. Third, you let me walk away if I can't handle this emotionally. Deal, Doña Cora said, her voice steady. But don't take too long to decide how you'll do this, IVF or otherwise. Faith laughed, a mix of disbelief and determination. Natural mom, really? Are you suggesting I hook up with some guy for this? Doña Cora smirked. It's faster. And who knows, you might enjoy it. 2 birds, 1. Well, you know. Faith burst into laughter, the tension breaking for a moment. But as she retreated to her room, the reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. Pregnant or married, those were her choices. No middle ground. She flung herself onto her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. She muttered, This is some Netflix drama nonsense, so she grabbed her phone to call Prenny, her best friend and confidant. Pick up Prenny, come on, Faith groaned, kicking at her comforter. When Prenny finally answered, her voice was bright and teasing. Yo, girl, I had the wildest dream about you last night. You were strutting in the sexy dress, holding a Prenny stop. Faith cut her off, her voice sharp with frustration. I'm not in the mood, I need you right now. The line went quiet, Prenny's tone shifting to concern. Wait for real. What's going on? Faith took a deep breath, the words spilling out. Mom's trying to force me into a blind wedding with some billionaire named Daniel. And if I say no, I have to get pregnant by the end of the year, like full-on baby-making mode. Silence. Then Prenny's voice exploded. Excuse me, pregnant? Do you need to find a baby daddy, girl? Is the universe pranking you? Faith laughed bitterly, flopping back onto her pillows. Right. It's like I'm the star of some twisted reality show. Faith's baby quest. Mom's offering $10 million if I pull it off, but the donor must be prime stock. No scrubs allowed. Prenny whistled. 10 million. Okay, I'm signing up as your casting director. We need a guy who's hot, bright, and drama-free, no baby daddy baggage. Faith rubbed her temples, the weight of it all sinking in. What if I can't do this, Pren? What if I end up married to some wealthy stranger who could be a total creep? Prenny's voice softened. You're Faith freaking Johnson. You've built apps that millions use. You'll figure this out, but are we talking IVF or... You know the old-fashioned way, Faith groaned, her face heating. I don't even know. IVF feels clinical, but finding a guy to... Ugh, it's like picking a steak off a menu. Weird and wrong. Let's make a list. Prenny suggested, her tone mischievous. Top 5 prospects. We'll vet them like it's a job interview. Who's first? Faith hesitated, her mind drifting to a vague memory of a guy Prenny once mentioned, a gym trainer named Nico. What about that trainer you worked with, Nico? Is he single? Prenny laughed. Nico. He's cute, but total playboy vibes. You need someone solid, not a fling. What about Raphael, our college valedictorian, brainy hot, probably still single? Faith sighed, her thoughts spiraling. I don't know, Pren. What if I can't find anyone? What if I wake up one day in a wedding dress surrounded by strangers? Or Prenny teased you wake up with a positive pregnancy test and a hot donor who's suddenly proposing. Plot twist. Faith threw a pillow at the air, laughing despite herself. Stop it, Prenny. This isn't a rom-com. Isn't it, though, Prenny quipped. Title 10 million for a baby, but I stole his heart. Faith smiled her heart lighter. Thanks, Pren. You always know how to make my chaos bearable. Always, girl. And if you need help auditioning donors, I'm bringing a clipboard and a flashlight. Let's make this happen. As Faith hung up, she stared at the city lights twinkling through her window. This wasn't the life she'd imagined, but she'd walk it if it were the path to her freedom. Little did she know the man she'd soon meet would offer more than just a transaction. He'd offer a chance at something real. Chaps. The days that followed were a blur of restless nights and racing thoughts. Faith couldn't shake the absurdity of her situation, but the ticking clock pushed her forward. She and Prenny met at a trendy rooftop bar in West Hollywood, buzzing with LA's elite models, tech moguls, and influencers sipping overpriced cocktails under string lights. Faith wore a sleek black dress with a daring slit, her confidence a shield against the weight of her decision. Prenny, in a vibrant red jumpsuit, radiated her usual charisma, her eyes scanning the crowd for potential candidates. Girl, you're serving looks tonight, Prenny said, clinking her glass against Faith's. If I were a guy, I'd be volunteering for your project. Faith smirked, sipping her martini. If you were a guy, I'd marry you just to shut Mom up. The bartender, a tall man with a charming smile and rolled-up sleeves, approached. Evening, ladies. Something strong to keep the night going, strong enough to knock me out, Faith replied, half joking. I'm dodging nightmares here. Prenny grinned. Make it quick, handsome. We're on a mission. As the bartender prepared their drinks, Faith's eyes wandered the room. The bar pulsed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, and the thrum of a DJ's beat. In her mind, she was already compiling a mental checklist. Healthy, intelligent, no red flags. This wasn't just a night out. It was a hunt. Okay, game time, Prenny said, leaning in. Target spotted, 9 o'clock. The guy in the Rolex is chatting up some blonde but looking bored. Faith glanced over, assessing. Pass. He's giving sugar daddy vibes. Probably has a secret family in Orange County. Prenny laughed. Fair. Okay, 12 o'clock. White shirt near the DJ booth. Tall, athletic, holding a beer. Cute smile. Faith turned her gaze, landing on a man with a relaxed posture and an easy grin. Not bad, she said, tilting her head. But he looks like he'd ghost me after the first doctor's appointment. Harsh, Prenny said, nudging her. You're not picking a husband, just a donor. Please keep it simple. Before Faith could respond, a man approached their table, tall, fair-skinned, in a tailored blazer. Mind if I join you? He asked, his smile confident. Prenny raised an eyebrow. Depends. Can you keep up? He laughed, unfazed. I'll try. I'm Chino 32, an architect single. Faith's lips twitched. Ever been married? Nope, Chino said, leaning back. You? God, no, Faith replied, sipping her drink. Last question. How often do you get health checkups? Chino blinked, then grinned. Yearly. Why is this a job interview or a medical exam? Something like that, Faith said, her tone playful but guarded. Prenny whispered, if this guy's game were set. Chino leaned in, intrigued. So, what's the deal? You two planning something big, just scoping out prospects, Prenny said smoothly, particular requirements. Chino raised his glass. I like a challenge. I'll apply. Faith laughed, but her mind was elsewhere. Chino was charming, but this wasn't a game. Every step had to be calculated, every choice deliberate. As the night wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that her real journey was beginning. The Santa Monica Fertility Clinic was a beacon of modern medicine, its glass facade reflecting the Pacific Ocean's shimmer under the California sun. Inside the waiting room was a blend of sleek design and clinical precision white walls, adorned with abstract art cushioned chairs arranged in neat rows, and a digital tablet at the reception desk displaying donor profiles. Faith sat alone, her fingers tapping nervously against the armrest. She wore a tailored navy jumpsuit, her curls pulled into a high bun, projecting the confidence of a woman who thrived in boardrooms. But beneath the polished exterior, her heart raced. This wasn't a business deal or a coding project she could debug. This was her future distilled into a single life-altering choice. Prenny had offered to come, but Faith insisted on doing this alone. She told her friend, I need to feel in control, though control felt like a distant dream now. The ultimatum from Doña Cora echoed in her mind: 7 months to get pregnant or a wedding to a billionaire stranger named Daniel. The $10 million trust fund dangled like a carrot, but the promise of freedom drove her here. She flipped through the tablet's profiles: doctors, lawyers, athletes, each reduced to stats height, IQ, genetic history. It felt cold, transactional, like swiping through a dating app with higher stakes. Ms. Johnson. A nurse in crisp scrubs appeared, her smile professional but warm. We have a walk-in donor available for a consultation if you're interested. He's here now and he meets our basic qualifications. Faith's breath caught. A walk-in. Can I meet him now? The nurse nodded. If you'd like, he's been screened healthy. 29 solid medical history. He's here for personal reasons, but is open to a discussion. Faith hesitated, her mind wrestling with the surreal reality of interviewing a sperm donor. But the clock was ticking, and she needed to take charge. Okay, let's do it. The nurse led her to a private consultation room, its walls a soft gray with a single window overlooking the ocean. Faith sat, her posture rigid, as the door opened. In walked a tall man with a lean build, sandy blonde hair, and striking blue eyes that held a mix of determination and unease. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans, contrasting the clinic's sterile elegance. His name was Wakin, a former software engineer from San Diego who'd left a promising startup to care for his younger sister who was battling a rare illness. Hi, he said, his voice low but steady. I'm Wakin. They said you wanted to meet me, Faith nodded, studying him. He didn't look like a man who belonged in a place like this, yet there was a quiet strength in his posture, a sincerity in his gaze. I'm Faith. I'm looking for a donor, but I don't want it to be anonymous. I need to know who you are. Wakin sat across from her, his hands clasped. Fair enough. I'm here because my sister needs surgery, expensive surgery. I'm not proud of this, but it's the only way I can help her. Faith's heart softened, but she kept her tone firm. I'm offering $10 million. In exchange, I need your sperm and 2 months of your time. You'd pretend to be my boyfriend, convince my mother we're serious. She can't know this is just a deal. Wakin's eyes widened, a flicker of shock crossing his face. 10 million for that and a fake relationship. It's not just that, Faith said, leaning forward. I need someone reliable, healthy, and not a criminal. Someone who won't disappear if my kid needs answers someday. Can you handle that? Wakin exhaled, running a hand through his hair. That's a lot of money. But I'm not doing this just for cash. My sister's life is on the line. If I say yes, I'll see it through. Faith studied him, searching for any hint of deception. His eyes were clear, his voice steady. Something about him felt safe. Okay, she said finally. I'll give you a day to think it over, but I'm not looking at anyone else. I think you're the one. Wakin blinked, caught off guard. You don't even know me. I will, Faith replied, standing. Meet me here tomorrow with your answer. As she walked out, the ocean breeze brushing her face, Faith felt a strange flutter in her chest. This wasn't the love story she'd dreamed of, but it was a start, a gamble on a man who might change everything. Faith returned to the clinic the next day, her nerves tangled with anticipation and doubt. She wore a sharp blazer and pencil skirt, her business mode armor, but her heart pounded as she entered the consultation room. Wakin was already there, dressed in a clean polo and jeans, his expression a mix of resolve and nervousness. Good morning, Faith, he said, standing as she entered. His voice was warm, but there was a tremor of uncertainty. Morning, she replied, sitting across from him. So what's your answer? Wakin took a deep breath. I'm in. I'll do it for the money, and because I think you deserve to be treated right. I won't let you down. Faith's lips parted, surprised by his sincerity. She pulled a folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. This is the contract. 10 million paid in 4 parts after insemination, after 1 month together before meeting my mom, and when the pregnancy's confirmed. If you back out before insemination, you get nothing. And for 2 months, you're my boyfriend, no dating anyone else, no slip-ups. My mom's a hawk. She'll smell a lie from a mile away. Wakin nodded, flipping through the contract. I get it, no side flings, no drama. I'll play the part. Do you have any acting experience? Faith asked, half teasing. Wakin grinned. Just community theater back in San Diego, but I'll give an Oscar-worthy performance for my sister and you. Faith couldn't help but smile. There was something disarming about him, a quiet charm that made her feel seen. She handed him another document. Medical waiver. Sign this and we can start the process this week. It includes DNA storage for future medical reference. Wakin signed without hesitation, his handwriting neat and deliberate. As he handed the papers back, he met her gaze. What happens if this works fast? After 2 months, if you're pregnant, am I out of the picture? Faith paused, her throat tightening. That's up to you. If you want no connection to the child, I'll respect that. But if I think they should know you, I'd ask you to stay not as a father, but as a friend to the family. Wakin nodded slowly. Fair enough. Let's make this work. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of orchestrated moments. Faith and Wakin attended events across Los Angeles, from charity galas in Hollywood to art openings in downtown LA. They shopped for matching outfits at Rodeo Drive Wakin, fumbling with a tailored suit while Faith laughed, her guard slowly lowering. At a fitting in a boutique lined with designer racks, Wakin emerged from the dressing room tugging at his cuffs. He said, "This feels like I'm auditioning for a rom-com," grinning. "Do I look convincing?" as your future husband Faith tilted her head, assessing. "Not bad. But stand straighter. Mom will notice if you slouch." Wakin chuckled, adjusting his posture. "You're tough. How do you survive in Silicon Valley with that glare?" "I don't just survive," Faith said, smirking. "I thrive." Their banter was easy, but beneath it, Faith felt a pull she couldn't ignore. Wakin was thoughtful, remembering her coffee order and asking about her latest app project. At a gala, he placed a hand on her back, guiding her through the crowd, and the warmth of his touch lingered longer than it should have. One evening at Faith's sleek downtown LA apartment, they shared a meal. Wakin cooked grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, heartfelt but straightforward. The city skyline sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a soft glow over the room. Faith sipped wine, watching Wakin move around her kitchen with ease. "You're good at this," she said, gesturing to the food. "Did you train as a chef too?" Wakin laughed, sitting across from her. "Nah. Grew up cooking for my sister. Mom wasn't around much, so I learned early." Faith's heart twinged. "You talk about her a lot, your sister." "She's my world," Wakin said softly. "She's only 16, but she's tougher than I am." "This surgery, it's her shot at an everyday life." Faith nodded, her walls softening. "I get it. Family's complicated. My mom, she's all about legacy, but it feels like she's trying to control my soul." Wakin reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "You're stronger than she thinks. I see it." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world fell away. Faith pulled back, her heart racing. "We should keep this professional." But that night, after one too many glasses of wine and a conversation that stretched into the early hours, professionalism gave way to something more profound. Wakin leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek, and Faith didn't pull away. Their kiss was tentative, then urgent, a collision of need and vulnerability. As they moved to her bedroom, the city lights fading behind them, Faith knew she was crossing a line, one she wasn't sure she could uncross. Chattery? Days later, Faith stood in her bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines stared back, a silent confirmation that her life had changed forever. Her hands trembled as she dialed Wakin's number. "Wakin, can you come over?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "What's wrong?" His concern was immediate, palpable through the phone. "Are you okay? Just come, please." Less than 30 minutes later, Wakin was at her door, his hair damp from a rushed shower, his eyes searching hers. "Faith, what's going on?" She handed him the test, her voice barely a whisper. "It's positive." Wakin stared at the stick, then at her. A slow smile broke across his face, and he hugged her, his arms strong and sure. "We did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby." Faith's eyes welled up, a mix of relief and fear. "You're not freaked out?" "Why would I be?" Wakin said, pulling back to meet her gaze. "This is our kid, Faith. I'm here for this for you." Faith felt the weight of her decision lift for the first time, replaced by a fragile hope. But a shadow lingered as they stood together, planning their next steps. Wakin's past was a mystery, and Faith couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. The Los Angeles skyline glittered like a constellation of dreams, its lights piercing the velvet dusk, as Faith and Wakin stepped out of a sleek black SUV onto the bustling streets of Hollywood. The air was alive with the hum of anticipation, the scent of jasmine mingling with the faint tang of expensive cologne. They were headed to a charity gala at the Dolby Theater, a grand affair where LA's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth and goodwill under the guise of philanthropy. Faith's heart thrummed with a cocktail of nerves and determination. Tonight was their first public appearance as a couple, a meticulously choreographed performance to convince Doña Cora that Faith was on the path to settling down. Faith wore a floor-length emerald gown that hugged her curves, its fabric catching the light like a forest at dawn. Her curls were swept into an elegant updo, accentuating the graceful curve of her neck. Wakin beside her looked unexpectedly polished in a tailored charcoal suit, the kind that transformed his casual demeanor into something almost regal. Yet his sandy blonde hair retained a boyish tousle, and his blue eyes flickered with amusement and unease as they approached the red carpet. "You clean up nice," Faith said, her voice teasing, but soft as they paused before the flurry of flashing cameras. "Not bad for a guy who thinks flannel is formal wear." Wakin grinned, adjusting his cufflinks with a self-conscious shrug. "Yeah, well, I'm just trying not to trip over my own feet. This is your world, Faith. I'm just borrowing it for the night." Her smile faltered, a pang of vulnerability cutting through her confidence. This wasn't her world, not really. The glitz, the glamour, the suffocating expectations belonged to her mother, to the legacy she'd been born into. But tonight she needed to play the part, and Wakin was her unlikely partner in this delicate charade. As they stepped onto the red carpet, Wakin's hand found the small of her back, a gesture both protective and practiced. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, unbidden and unsettling. She glanced at him, catching the faintest hint of a smile, and for a moment the cameras and the crowd faded into a distant hum. They were two actors on a stage, but the lines between pretense and reality were already beginning to blur. Inside the theater, crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in white linen, each adorned with centerpieces of orchids and flickering candles. The gala was a who of LA's elite tech moguls, film producers, and philanthropists, mingling with the ease of those accustomed to power. Faith navigated the room with practiced grace, introducing Wakin as her boyfriend, with a smile that felt more natural than she'd expected. He played his role flawlessly, charming a group of investors with a story about his days coding for a startup in San Diego, his humor disarming and his sincerity palpable. "You're good at this," Faith whispered, as they moved to the dance floor, a string quartet filling the air with a haunting melody. Almost too good. Wakin's hand settled on her waist, pulling her close as they swayed to the music. "I told you, community theater. I've got some moves." His voice was light, but his eyes held hers, searching, as if trying to read the thoughts she kept so carefully guarded. Faith's breath caught her heart racing, not from the dance, but from the intensity of his gaze. "Don't get too comfortable," she said, her tone half teasing, half warning. "This is still a job, is it?" Wakin murmured, his voice low, almost a challenge. "Feels like more than that sometimes." She looked away, focusing on the swirl of gowns and tuxedos around them. He was right, and that scared her. The way he remembered her favorite coffee order and listened when she talked about her latest app project was disarming and dangerous. She'd chosen him for a transaction, not a love story. Yet as they moved together, their steps in sync, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was taking root. The night wore on, and Faith and Wakin slipped out to a balcony overlooking Hollywood Boulevard, after a particularly tedious conversation with a venture capitalist. The city stretched out below, a tapestry of lights and ambition. Faith leaned against the railing, the cool night air a welcome relief from the gala's stifling opulence. "You okay?" Wakin asked, joining her. He'd loosened his tie, his casual ease returning like a familiar melody. Faith sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass. This whole thing, pretending, smiling, playing the perfect daughter, is exhausting. "I want to be me, you know. Not Doña Cora's heir, not some trophy for a billionaire's arm." Wakin nodded, his expression softening. "I get it. Back in San Diego, I was the guy with big dreams, coding apps that could change the world. Then my sister got sick, and suddenly I'm just the guy trying to keep her alive. Sometimes you don't get to be who you want." Faith turned to him, her eyes searching his. "Why didn't you tell me that before, about your dreams?" He shrugged, a wistful smile tugging at his lips. "Didn't think it mattered. You hired me for a job, not a life story." "Maybe I want to know," she said quietly, surprising herself. "I need to know who you are, Wakin." He held her gaze, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm a guy who believes in second chances, who thinks life's messy, but sometimes the mess leads you somewhere worth going, like here with you." Faith's heart stuttered, but before she could respond, a server interrupted, offering champagne. The moment broke, but its echo lingered as they returned to the gala, their hands brushing as they walked. Faith told herself it was just the wine, the music, the magic of the night, but deep down she knew better. The following week, they found themselves on Rodeo Drive, the iconic street lined with boutiques that screamed wealth and exclusivity. Faith had insisted on a shopping trip to perfect their couple look for an upcoming family event in Malibu. The store was a haven of luxury racks of designer suits and dresses mirrors reflecting endless possibilities and sales associates who moved with the precision of ballet dancers. Faith sat on a plush velvet couch sipping a cappuccino while Wakin emerged from the dressing room in a cream-colored suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Hollywood blockbuster. "Wow," Faith said, her voice betraying a flicker of admiration. "You're giving James Bond a run for his money." Wakin laughed, tugging at the lapels. "This thing costs more than my car. You sure it's not too much?" "It's perfect," Faith said, standing to adjust his tie. Her fingers brushed his chest and she felt a jolt like static electricity. "Mom will eat this up. You're supposed to look like you belong in her world." Wakin's eyes softened, his voice dropping. "And what about your world, Faith? Do I belong there?" She froze, her hand still on his tie. The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. "Let's not complicate this," she said, stepping back, though her heart begged to disagree. Wakin's phone buzzed as they left the boutique, bags in hand. He glanced at it, his face tightening. "It's the hospital," he said, stepping away to take the call. Faith watched him, catching snippets of his conversation, words like surgery and insurance. His smile was strained when he returned, but he waved off her concern. He said he was checking on my sister. She's doing okay for now. Faith wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of this man who was supposed to be a means to an end. But she held back, afraid of what she might find and what she might feel. Their next test came at a private dinner hosted by Doña Cora at her Beverly Hills estate. The dining room was a vision of grandeur, mahogany table, crystal glassware, and a chandelier that cast prisms of light across the room. Doña Cora sat at the head, her presence commanding, while Faith and Wakin sat side by side, their hands occasionally brushing under the table. The menu was exquisite seared scallops, truffle risotto, and a vintage Bordeaux, but the conversation was a minefield. "So, Wakin," Doña Cora said, her voice smooth but probing. "What do you do exactly? Faith tells me you're between opportunities." Wakin didn't flinch. He said, "I used to code for a startup in San Diego," and his tone was steady. "Now I'm freelancing, helping small businesses with their tech. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me grounded." Doña Cora raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Grounded is one thing, ambitious is another. My daughter deserves someone who can match her drive." Faith's jaw tightened, but Wakin squeezed her hand under the table, his touch a silent reassurance. "With all due respect, Miss Cora," he said, "Faith's drive is what makes her incredible. I'm here to support her, not compete with her." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the table. Faith's heart swelled, a mix of pride and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. Doña Cora's lips twitched, a reluctant acknowledgement of his boldness. Later, as they stood in the estate's garden, the scent of roses heavy in the air, Faith turned to Wakin. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Stand up to her like that." Wakin shrugged, his eyes catching the moonlight. "I meant it. You're not just some prize to be won, Faith. You're you." She looked at him, her defenses crumbling. She whispered that you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "It's supposed to be hard." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world was just the two of them, the night wrapping them in its embrace. Faith knew she was treading dangerous waters, but as Wakin's hand brushed her cheek, she let herself sink into the tide. The downtown Los Angeles skyline sparkled like a promise, kept its towering glass edifices reflecting the last rays of a crimson sunset. Faith's apartment, perched on the top floor of a sleek high-rise, was a sanctuary of modern elegance, open plan with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a living canvas. The space was a reflection of her bold, yet refined, with a minimalist aesthetic softened by touches of warmth, a plush throw blanket, a shelf of well-worn books, and a framed photo of her and Prenny at a tech conference laughing like the world was theirs to conquer. The air held a different energy tonight, one charged with possibility and peril. Faith stood in her kitchen, stirring a glass of Pinot Noir, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. The past weeks with Wakin had been a delicate dance of pretense, their public appearances as a couple growing more convincing with each outing. But beneath the surface, something fundamental was stirring, a connection that thrilled and terrified her. Tonight, Wakin was coming over not for a staged event, but for something simpler: dinner conversation, a moment to breathe amidst the chaos of their arrangement. The doorbell chimed, and Faith's heart skipped. She opened the door to find Wakin, his usual flannel replaced by a crisp white shirt, his blue eyes bright with anticipation and nerves. In his hands was a reusable tote, brimming with ingredients: fresh herbs, a loaf of sourdough, and a bottle of sparkling water. "You didn't have to cook," Faith said, stepping aside to let him in. "I could have ordered takeout." Wakin grinned, setting the bag on the counter. "Where's the fun in that? Besides, I make a mean pasta primavera. My sister swears it's better than anything in Little Italy." Faith raised an eyebrow, her lips curving. "Big talk for a guy from San Diego. Let's see if you can back it up." As Wakin moved around her kitchen, chopping vegetables with practiced ease, Faith watched him, a quiet fascination settling over her. Something was grounding about his presence, a contrast to the frenetic pace of her life. She leaned against the counter, sipping her wine, and let herself relax for the first time in weeks. "Tell me something," she said, her voice soft but curious. "What's the one thing you'd do if money weren't an issue, if you didn't have to worry about your sister's bills?" Wakin paused, his knife hovering over a bell pepper. "I'd go back to coding," he said after a moment. "Not for some flashy startup, but for something real: apps that help people, like connecting patients with affordable care. That's what I was working on before everything." Faith nodded, her respect for him deepening. "You're a dreamer, Wakin. I didn't expect that." He looked at her, his eyes warm but guarded. "And you, what's Faith Johnson's big dream beyond escaping your mom's plans?" She hesitated, the question catching her off guard. "I want to build something that lasts," she said finally. "An app, a company, something that changes lives. But sometimes I wonder if I'm running from her shadow." Wakin set down his knife, stepping closer. "You're not running, Faith. You're building. There's a difference." Their eyes met, and the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Faith's pulse quickened, her wine glass forgotten on the counter. Wakin reached out his fingers, brushing hers, and the world seemed to tilt. "Faith," he said, his voice low, "this deal we have, it's not just a job for me anymore." She swallowed, her throat tight. "Don't say that. We have rules." "Screw the rules," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm here because I want to be, because I see you." Before she could protest, Wakin closed the distance, his lips finding hers in a tentative and electric kiss. Faith froze, then melted into him, her hands rising to his chest as the kiss deepened, a rush of warmth and want flooding her senses. The world outside her apartment ceased to exist. There was only Wakin, his hands steady on her waist, his breath mingling with hers. They stumbled toward her bedroom, the city lights casting shadows across the walls. The night unfolded in a blur of whispers and touches, each moment a confession of something neither dared to name. As they lay together afterward, the silence was soft, intimate, broken only by the hum of the city below. "I didn't plan this," Faith murmured, her voice barely audible as she curled against him. Wakin's arm tightened around her. "Neither did I. But I'm not sorry." She smiled, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. "Your trouble, Wakin." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The best kind, I hope." The next morning, Faith woke to the scent of coffee and the sight of Wakin in her kitchen, flipping pancakes with a boyish grin. The domesticity of it all was disorienting yet oddly comforting. She pulled on a robe, her mind replaying the night before, and joined him at the counter. "You're still here," she said, her tone teasing but soft. "Figured I owed you breakfast," Wakin replied, sliding a plate toward her. "Pancakes, maple syrup, the works. My sister's recipe." Faith took a bite, her eyes widening. "Okay, these are good. Better than my usual smoothie." Wakin laughed, sitting across from her. High praise. "So, what's next? Another gala? Or are we practicing for the big meet the mom moment?" Faith's smile faded, reality crashing back. "The Malibu dinner's coming up. Mom's invited half her social circle to size you up. It's going to be brutal." Wakin reached for her hand, his touch steadying. "We've got this. I'll charm the socks off her." She squeezed his hand, grateful but wary. "You'd better. She's got a nose for fakes." The Malibu estate was a vision of coastal grandeur, its white stucco walls glowing under the setting sun. The dinner was held on a terrace overlooking the Pacific, the table set with linen napkins and silver cutlery, and the ocean's rhythm was a soothing backdrop. Doña Cora presided over the gathering like a queen, and her guests were a mix of real estate tycoons and old money heirs. Faith and Wakin arrived hand in hand, their coupledom a carefully crafted illusion, yet the warmth of his grip felt anything but fake. Doña Cora's questions grew sharper as the evening unfolded, her scrutiny unrelenting. Wakin, tell me, she said, her voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. What's your 5-year plan? Faith is destined for greatness. Can you keep up? Wakin met her gaze unfazed. I plan to be there for Faith whatever she needs. I don't need a corner office to know she's worth it. Faith's heart swelled, but Doña Cora's smile was thin. Admirable, but ambition matters. My daughter deserves a partner who can match her. Before Faith could intervene, a guest, a silver-haired man in a bespoke suit, interrupted with a toast, diffusing the tension. But as the night wore on, Faith caught Doña Cora watching Wakin, her expression unreadable. It wasn't until dessert, as the guests mingled on the terrace, that the bombshell dropped. Daniel, Doña Cora said, her voice carrying over the hum of conversation. It's been a while. Faith froze her glass halfway to her lips. Wakin's face paled, his eyes darting to her. I'm sorry, what Faith said, her voice sharp. Doña Cora's smile was triumphant. Oh, didn't he tell you Wakin is Daniel Wakin Villarreal, the man I've been trying to introduce you to for months? The world tilted, the ocean's roar drowning out the chatter. Faith's eyes locked on Wakin, betrayal cutting through her like a knife. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Faith, I can explain. Wakin began, but she was already moving her heels, clicking against the stone as she fled the terrace, the weight of his deception crashing over her. In the days that followed, Faith retreated to her apartment. Her phone silenced her heart, a battleground of anger and hurt. Prenny tried to coax her out, but Faith needed space-time to process the truth. Wakin, the man she'd let into her heart, was Daniel the billionaire her mother had chosen. Had any of it been real, or was she just a pawn in a game she hadn't seen coming? Late one night, a knock came at her door as rain streaked her windows. Wakin stood there soaked and weary, his eyes pleading. Faith, please, let me explain. She crossed her arms, her voice cold. You had months to tell me the truth. Why didn't you? Wakin stepped inside, his voice low but urgent. I didn't know your mom set this up at first. When I found out, I was already falling for you. I didn't want to lose you by admitting I was the guy you were running from. Faith's eyes burned with unshed tears. So you let me believe you were someone else. How am I supposed to trust you now? He took a step closer, his voice breaking. Because I'm here, Faith. Not for the money, not for your mom's approval. For you. I love you. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Faith's walls trembled, but she wasn't ready to let them fall. I need time, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I need to know who you are. Wakin nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I'll wait as long as it takes. As he left, the rain still falling, Faith sank onto her couch, her heart a storm of doubt and longing. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but one thing was sure, Wakin Daniel had changed her, and there was no going back. The rain had painted Los Angeles in shades of silver, its gentle patter a soft counterpoint to the storm raging in Faith's heart. Her downtown LA apartment, usually a haven of sleek modernity, felt like a cage tonight. The city skyline visible through the towering windows shimmered with a restless energy that mirrored her own. Faith sat curled on her couch, a cashmere blanket draped over her shoulders, her phone silent after days of ignoring Wakin's calls and texts. The revelation at the Malibu dinner that Wakin was Daniel the billionaire her mother had chosen had shattered the fragile trust she'd built with him. Every moment they'd shared, every touch, every whispered confession, now felt tainted by the shadow of deception. Faith's fingers traced the edge of a pregnancy test, its 2 pink lines a stark reminder of the life growing inside her. The news confirmed just days before the disastrous dinner should have been a triumph, a step toward the freedom she'd fought for. Instead, it was a weight anchoring her to a man whose true identity she hadn't known. Was his affection genuine, or was it part of some elaborate scheme orchestrated by her mother? The question gnawed at her, as relentless as the rain outside. Prenny had tried to pull her out of her spiral, arriving one evening with a bottle of sparkling cider and a playlist of 90s R&B. "Girl, you can't hide forever," Prenny had said, sprawled across Faith's couch like she owned it. Wakin messed up, no doubt. But the way he looked at you, that wasn't fake. You need to talk to him. Faith had shaken her head, her voice tight. He lied, Pren. How do I trust him now? What if this baby is part of the deal? Prenny's eyes softened. You're scared. I get it. But you're Faith Johnson. You don't run from hard things. You face them. Those words echoed as Faith stared at her phone, Wakin's latest message glowing. I'm not giving up on you. Please let me explain. I'm at the coffee shop on 7th. I'll wait. The message was hours old, sent in the early evening when the city was still alive with possibility. Faith glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. The coffee shop would be closed and the streets would be empty. But something in her stirred a pull she couldn't ignore. She grabbed her coat, her heart pounding as she entered the elevator. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the city streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. The coffee shop, a cozy nook with exposed brick and warm lighting, was indeed closed, but through the glass she saw Wakin sitting on a bench outside, his jacket damp, his head bowed. He looked like a man carrying the weight of his mistakes, and Faith's resolve wavered momentarily. She approached, her footsteps soft against the wet pavement. Wakin looked up, his blue eyes wide with surprise and hope. Faith, he said, standing, his voice rough with emotion. You came. I almost didn't, she admitted, pulling her coat tighter. Please give me one reason I should listen to you. Wakin stepped closer, the drizzle catching in his hair like tiny diamonds. Because I love you, he said. Not because of your mom, the money, or the deal. I love you, Faith, and I've been trying to find the courage to tell you who I am. Her breath caught the sincerity in his voice, cutting through her defenses. Then why didn't you? Why let me believe you were just Wakin? He ran a hand through his hair, his expression pained. I was going to tell you. That night at your apartment before everything. But I got scared. Scared you'd see me as the guy your mom picked, not the guy who chose you. I'm Daniel Wakin Valerial, but I left that life behind, private jets, boardrooms, all of it. I wanted to be someone who earned you, not someone who was handed to you. Faith's eyes burned, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. You should have trusted me, she said, her voice breaking. I let you in, Wakin. I told you things I've never told anyone, and now I don't know what's real. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. This is real, he said, his voice fierce. Every moment we've had, cooking dinner, dancing at the gala that night in your apartment, it's all real. I'm here, Faith, and I'll keep showing up until you believe me. She shook her head, her heart a battleground of doubt and longing. I need time, she said finally. I need to figure out what this means for me, for the baby. Wakin nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I'll wait, however long it takes. As she walked away, the city's pulse seemed to match her own, fast, uncertain, alive with possibility. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but the thought of a life without him felt like a loss she wasn't ready to face. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act. Faith threw herself into her work at her Silicon Valley startup, her days filled with coding marathons and investor meetings, her nights haunted by thoughts of Wakin. He respected her space, sending only occasional texts, updates about his sister's improving health, a photo of a sunset over San Diego, a simple "I'm thinking of you." Each message chipped away at her resolve, a reminder of the man who'd seen her, truly seen her beyond the expectations of her mother's world. One afternoon, as Faith was debugging a new app feature, a delivery arrived at her office, a small package wrapped in craft paper tied with twine. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly smudged as if written hastily. Faith, it began, I know I hurt you, and I'll carry that regret forever. But I need you to know who I am, not Daniel, the name your mom knows, but Wakin, the guy who grew up surfing in San Diego, who coded his first app at 16, who'd do anything for his sister. I'm not perfect, but I'm yours if you'll have me. P.S. I made you something. Tucked inside was a USB drive. Curiosity won out, and Faith plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained a simple app. Its interface was clean and intuitive. It was a journal designed to track pregnancy milestones with sections for notes, photos, and even a playlist of soothing music. A note popped up. For you and our little one. I hope it helps. Faith's throat tightened, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the app. It was thoughtful, personal, a piece of Wakin's heart coded into existence. That evening she called Prenny, her voice unsteady. "He made me an app," she said, laughing through tears. "Who does that?" Prenny's laugh was warm, familiar. "A guy who's head over heels, that's who." "What are you going to do, Faith?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can't keep running from this." Chai! The turning point came at a tech conference in San Francisco, where Faith was a keynote speaker. The venue, a glass-walled convention center overlooking the bay, buzzed with innovators and entrepreneurs, their energy starkly contrasting the turmoil in Faith's heart. She delivered her speech flawlessly, her voice steady as she spoke about the future of inclusive tech, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd, searching for a familiar face. After the session, as she mingled with attendees, she spotted Wakin near the back, his hands in his pockets, his expression a mix of pride and uncertainty. He'd come uninvited, a quiet gesture of support. Faith's heart skipped, and she approached him before she could second-guess herself. "You're here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I couldn't miss it," Wakin replied, his eyes searching hers. "You were incredible up there." She took a deep breath, the weight of her decision settling over her. "We need to talk, really talk." They found a quiet corner, the bay's waves glinting through the windows. Faith spoke first, her voice raw. "I'm scared, Wakin, afraid that this us was built on a lie. But I'm also scared of losing you. I don't know how to do this." Wakin took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I messed up, Faith. I should have told you the truth from the start. But I'm not that guy your mom wanted. I'm just me, and I'm in love with you. If you'll give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving it." Faith's eyes glistened, her heart torn between caution and hope. "And the baby, what does this mean for them?" Wakin's voice was steady, unwavering. "I'm here for both of you, not because of a contract, but because I want to be. I want to be the guy who shows up and builds a life with you." She looked at him, the man who'd started as a stranger and become much more. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's try, but no more secrets." Wakin's smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. No more secrets, he promised. As they left the conference hand in hand, the city seemed to hum with possibility. Faith didn't know what the future held, but she felt ready to face it for the first time with Wakin by her side. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before the Malibu estate, its waves whispering secrets to the shore as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of coral and gold. The terrace where Doña Cora's latest gathering was unfolding was a vision of coastal elegance, long tables draped in crisp white linen adorned with seashell centerpieces and flickering lanterns. The air carried the scent of salt and citrus, mingling with the laughter of guests, a mix of LA's old money and new tech titans. Faith stood at the edge of the terrace, her burgundy dress flowing like a cascade of wine, her curls catching the breeze. Beside her, Wakin was a picture of understated charm in a navy blazer, his hand resting lightly on hers, a silent anchor in the sea of scrutiny. Their reconciliation in San Francisco had been a fragile bridge built on tentative trust and unspoken promises. Tonight was their first major test, a formal dinner, where Doña Cora would evaluate Wakin as Faith's partner, unaware that he was the Daniel she'd intended for her daughter all along. Faith's heart was a tightrope balancing hope and fear. She believed in Wakin's love, but the shadow of his deception lingered, a quiet doubt that surfaced in moments of stillness. Doña Cora moved through the crowd with the grace of a queen, her silver gown shimmering under the twilight. She greeted guests with a practiced smile, but her eyes kept returning to Faith and Wakin, assessing, calculating. As dinner began, the clink of crystal and the hum of conversation filled the air, but Faith felt the weight of her mother's gaze like a spotlight. "Wakin," Doña Cora said, her voice smooth but pointed as she sipped her champagne. "You've been charming my daughter for weeks now. Tell me, what are your intentions?" Wakin met her gaze, his voice steady. "My intentions are simple, Ms. Cora. I want to be the man Faith can rely on, who stands by her through everything, her dreams, challenges, and future." Faith's chest warmed, his words a balm to her nerves. But Doña Cora's smile was thin, her eyes narrowing. "Admirable. But Faith's future requires more than good intentions. She's destined for greatness. Can you match that?" Before Wakin could respond, a guest, a tech mogul with a penchant for drama, raised a glass, diverting the conversation. Faith squeezed Wakin's hand under the table, a silent thank you for his composure. But as the night wore on, the tension built, a storm gathering beneath the surface. It was during dessert, as plates of lavender-infused panna cotta were served, that Doña Cora dropped her bombshell. She stood, her champagne flute raised, her voice carrying over the terrace. A toast, she said, her eyes locking on Wakin, to new beginnings and Daniel, who's finally shown his true face. Faith's fork clattered to her plate, her breath catching. The guests murmured confused as Wakin's face paled. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Faith asked, her voice sharp. Doña Cora's smile was triumphant, almost cruel. "Oh, darling, didn't you know? Your Wakin is Daniel Wakin Villarreal, the man I chose for you months ago. Did he think he could hide it forever?" The world seemed to freeze, the ocean's rhythm fading to a dull roar in Faith's ears. She turned to Wakin, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "Is this true?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Wakin's jaw tightened, his eyes pleading. "Faith, I was going to tell you." "Tell me what," she snapped, standing, her chair scraping against the stone. "That you've been lying to me this whole time. That you're the billionaire my mom's been pushing on me." The guests fell silent, their eyes darting between Faith and Wakin. Doña Cora watched, her expression unreadable, as if she'd planned this moment all along. Wakin stood reaching for Faith, but she stepped back, her heart fracturing. "Faith, please," he said, his voice raw. "I didn't know about your mom's plan at first. By the time I found out, I was already falling for you. I didn't want to be Daniel to you, I wanted to be me." Faith shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "You had every chance to tell me. Every single one." She turned, her dress swirling as she fled the terrace, the ocean's whispers drowning out Wakin's calls. The days that followed were a blur of isolation and introspection. Faith locked herself in her apartment, the city's lights a mocking reminder of the life she'd thought she was building. Prenny came and went, offering coffee and comfort, but Faith's heart was a battlefield. She was pregnant with Wakin's child, bound to him in a way she couldn't escape yet. The sting of his deception cut deeper than she'd imagined. Every memory, their kisses, laughter, the app he'd built for her, felt tainted, a beautiful lie. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, the city humming below, a package arrived. It was a small journal, leather-bound and embossed with her initials. Inside was another letter from Wakin, his handwriting steady but urgent. "Faith, I know I broke your trust, and I'll spend my life making it right. This journal is for you, for the moments you're scared, excited, or need to breathe. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I am. I love you, and I love our baby. I'll be at the pier in Santa Monica tomorrow night. If you're ready, I'll be there." Faith's fingers trembled as she flipped through the journal, its blank pages an invitation to write a new chapter. She didn't know if she could trust him again, but the thought of facing this pregnancy alone, of raising their child without him, felt like a loss too significant to bear. The Santa Monica pier was alive with the pulse of summer, its Ferris wheel spinning against the starry sky, the scent of cotton candy and sea salt heavy in the air. Faith arrived, her heart a knot of nerves, her simple white dress catching the breeze. Wakin stood near the boardwalk, his silhouette framed by the ocean, his hands in his pockets as he watched the waves. "You came," he said as she approached, his voice thick with relief. "I'm not here to forgive you," Faith said, her tone firm but softer than she'd intended. "I'm here to understand." Wakin nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I was a kid who grew up with nothing, Faith. My dad was a tech mogul but walked out when I was 10. I built my own life coding, surfing, caring for my sister. When your mom reached out, offering a way to pay for her surgery, I said yes. But I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to fall in love." Faith's throat tightened, his words stirring the embers of her trust. "Why didn't you tell me after we got close? Why keep lying?" "I was scared," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Frightened you'd see me as her pawn, not the guy who'd choose you every time. I'm so sorry, Faith. I'll do whatever it takes to earn you back." She looked at him, the man who'd started as a stranger and become her heart's most significant risk. The pier's lights danced in his eyes, and for the first time she saw not just Wakin, but Daniel, the man who'd chosen her, flaws and all. "I'm pregnant," she said finally, her voice steady, "and I'm terrified, but I don't want to do this alone." Wakin stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. "You won't. I'm here for you, the baby, whatever comes next." Faith took his hand, her fingers trembling, but sure. "No more lies," she said. "We start over right now." He nodded, his smile tentative but radiant. "Right now." As they walked along the pier, the ocean's song was a gentle promise, and Faith felt the first stirrings of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Wakin by her side, she was ready to face it, heart open, fears and all. The San Francisco Bay sparkled under the midday sun, its waves a restless dance of light and shadow, mirroring the tumult in Faith's heart. Her office in Silicon Valley, a sleek glass tower in the heart of Palo Alto, was a sanctuary of innovation, open-plan desks, buzzing with coders' walls, lined with screens displaying data visualizations, and a coffee bar that rivaled any hipster cafe. Faith stood at her desk, her fingers hovering over her laptop, but her mind was miles away, lost in the memory of Wakin's touch on the Santa Monica Pier, his promise to start over, and the fragile hope that had begun to bloom between them. Since their reconciliation under the pier's starlit glow, Faith and Wakin had navigated their relationship with cautious steps like dancers learning a new rhythm. They'd spent evenings together, not as a staged couple, but as two people rediscovering each other. Wakin had opened up about his past, his father's abandonment, his mother's quiet strength, and the startup dreams he'd shelved to care for his sister. Faith, in turn, had shared her fears of motherhood, losing herself to her mother's expectations and trusting a man who'd once hidden his truth. Yet with each conversation, the walls between them softened, replaced by a tentative trust that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Today, Faith was preparing for a critical meeting with investors, her startup's latest app, a platform for connecting underserved communities with mental health resources nearing its launch. But her focus wavered, her thoughts drifting to the life growing inside her. She was 6 weeks pregnant, a secret she'd shared only with Wakin and Prenny, and the reality of it was both a beacon and a burden. She touched her stomach absent-mindedly, a flicker of wonder mingling with her nerves. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. A text from Wakin. "Just dropped my sister off at physical therapy. She's asking about you. Said you sound like a badass. Can I swing by later?" Faith smiled, her heart warming at the thought of Wakin's sister, a teenager whose resilience mirrored her brother's. "Sure," she replied. "Bring coffee. I'm drowning in code." The day passed in a blur of meetings and revisions, but as evening fell, Faith felt a shift, a quiet anticipation that had nothing to do with her work. Wakin arrived at her office just as the last employees were leaving, his presence a grounding force amidst the chaos of her day. He carried a tray of coffee and a paper bag from a nearby bakery, his smile as warm as the fading sunlight. He said, "You look like you're carrying the world," as he set the coffee on her desk. "Thought you could use a break." Faith laughed, accepting the cup. "You have no idea. This app launch is killing me." Wakin leaned against her desk, his eyes soft but searching. "You're killing it, Faith. I saw your keynote last week. You had that room eating out of your hand." She blushed, unaccustomed to his unguarded admiration. "Flattery won't get you anywhere, you know." "Maybe not," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I would like coffee and croissants." They shared a laugh, the moment light but charged with an undercurrent of intimacy. As they sat nibbling on pastries and sipping coffee, Faith felt a rare ease settle over her. Wakin wasn't just the man who'd lied about his identity. He was the man who'd coded an app for her pregnancy, who listened to her dreams, who showed up when she needed him most. "Wakin," she said, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about us, about the baby. I'm still scared, but I want this to work, not just for the contract, but for us." His eyes lit up, a spark of hope igniting. "You mean that?" She nodded, her throat tight. "I do. But we have a big hurdle coming up. Mom's hosting a family brunch in Napa Valley this weekend. She will grill you, and we're done if she senses anything off." Wakin took her hand, his touch steady. "Then we'll be perfect. I'm not losing you, Faith. Not now, not ever." The Napa Valley brunch was a vision of pastoral elegance held at a sprawling vineyard estate owned by Doña Cora's real estate empire. Rows of grapevines stretched toward the horizon, their leaves kissed by the morning mist, while tables on the lawn were adorned with white linens and bouquets of lavender. The air carried the scent of fresh bread and ripe fruit, a symphony of abundance that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. Doña Cora presided over the gathering in a tailored cream suit with her usual regal air. Her guests were a mix of family friends and business associates, all eager to see Faith's mysterious new partner. Faith wore a flowing sundress in deep sapphire, her curls cascading over her shoulders, a quiet defiance in her posture. Wakin, in a crisp linen shirt and khakis, looked every bit the part of the devoted boyfriend, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of nerves. They'd rehearsed their story, how they'd met at a tech meetup, how their shared love of innovation had sparked a connection, but Faith knew her mother's scrutiny would be relentless. As they sat, plates piled with croissants and fresh berries, Doña Cora turned her attention to Wakin. "So, Wakin," she said, her voice smooth but laced with challenge, "you've been spending quite a bit of time with my daughter. Tell me what makes you think you're worthy of her." Faith's jaw tightened, but Wakin's smile was calm, disarming. "Ms. Cora, I don't think anyone's entirely worthy of Faith. She's brilliant and fierce, building a legacy that'll outshine us all. I'm lucky to be by her side, supporting her every step." The table fell silent, the guests exchanging glances. Faith's heart swelled her hand, finding Wakin's under the table. Doña Cora's expression softened, but only slightly. "Pretty words," she said, "but words don't build empires." "What's your plan, Wakin?" Or should I say Daniel? Faith froze her pulse racing. She'd told Wakin to expect this, her mother's knack for twisting the knife, but hearing his real name aloud was a jolt. Wakin didn't flinch, his voice steady. "You can call me whatever you like, Ms. Cora, but I'm here for Faith, not for your approval. I love her, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hung in the air, bold and unyielding. Faith's breath caught her eyes, meeting Wakin's, and for a moment the world was just them. Doña Cora raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a reluctant smile. "We'll see," she said, sipping her mimosa. "We'll see." Later, as the guests wandered the vineyard, Faith and Wakin stole a moment by a stone fountain, its water sparkling in the sunlight. The scent of lavender wrapped around them, a quiet cocoon amidst the chatter. Faith leaned against Wakin, her head resting on his shoulder. "You were incredible back there," she said, her voice soft. "I thought she'd eat you alive." Wakin chuckled, his arm slipping around her. "She's tough, but I've faced worse, like convincing you to give me a second chance." Faith laughed, the sound light and free. "You're not out of the woods yet. Mom's planning a bigger event, a gala in San Francisco next month. If we survive that, we might make it." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "We will, because this isn't just about surviving, Faith. It's about building something real together." She looked up at him, the vineyard stretching behind them like a promise of forever. Together she echoed her heart, daring to believe. As they walked back to the brunch, hand in hand, Faith felt a shift, a quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them as one. The baby, the contract, and her mother's expectations were no longer burdens, but pieces of a life she chose with Wakin by her side. The San Francisco skyline glowed under a twilight sky, its spires piercing the heavens like a symphony of ambition and dreams. The Palace of Fine Arts. A relic of romance with its domed rotunda and serene lagoon, was transformed into a stage for Doña Cora's grand gala, a celebration of her latest real estate triumph. Fairy lights twinkled along the colonnades, and tables in gold-trimmed silk bore crystal flutes and platters of artisanal canapes. The air was thick with the scent of roses and anticipation, a heady mix that set Faith's nerves alight as she stepped into the venue, her arm linked with Wakin's. Faith wore a gown of midnight blue, its sequined bodice catching the light like a starry night, her curls swept into a low chignon that accentuated the elegance of her neck. Wakin, in a tailored black tuxedo, was a vision of quiet strength, his sandy blonde hair tamed, but his blue eyes alive with determination and adoration. They'd survived the Napa Valley brunch, their bond strengthened by Wakin's bold stand against Doña Cora's scrutiny. Still, tonight was a different beast, a public declaration of their partnership, with the added weight of Faith's pregnancy, still a secret known only to them and Prenny. The gala was a spectacle of wealth and influence, with tech moguls, politicians, and philanthropists mingling under the rotunda's golden glow. Doña Cora moved through the crowd like a conductor, her silver gown shimmering as she greeted guests with a gracious and calculated smile. Faith felt the weight of her mother's expectations, a silent pressure to prove that Wakin was more than a fleeting choice. Wakin's hand rested lightly on Faith's back as they mingled, a steady anchor amidst the sea of faces. He charmed a group of investors with a story about his coding days, his humor disarming, his sincerity a quiet force. Faith watched him, her heart swelling with pride. He wasn't just playing a role anymore. He was her partner, her confidant, the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen to stay. Faith, Doña Cora called, her voice cutting through the chatter as she approached. A word, darling Faith tensed, but Wakin squeezed her hand, a silent reassurance. They followed Doña Cora to a quiet alcove where the lagoon's reflection danced on the stone walls. Doña Cora's eyes flicked to Wakin, her expression unreadable. "You've been quite the surprise, Daniel," she said, using his full name with deliberate emphasis. "I expected resistance from Faith, but you've managed to win her. I'm curious, how long do you plan to keep up this charade?" Faith's heart sank, her mother's words a dagger aimed at their fragile trust. But Wakin stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "It's not a charade, Miss Cora. I love your daughter, and I'm here for the long haul, not because of your plans, but because of her." Doña Cora's lips curved, a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Bold words. "But love doesn't pay for a legacy. Faith is carrying a child, my grandchild. What can you offer them?" Faith's breath caught her hand, instinctively moving to her stomach. She hadn't told her mother about the pregnancy. How did she know? Wakin's eyes widened, but he didn't falter. "He said I can offer them everything I have," his voice steady. "My heart, my time, my commitment. Faith and our baby deserve that, and I'll spend my life proving it." The air crackled with tension, Doña Cora's gaze piercing. Then, to Faith's surprise, her mother nodded, a rare softness in her eyes. "Very well," she said. "But know this, Daniel, if you hurt my daughter, no amount of money will protect you." As Doña Cora walked away, Faith turned to Wakin, her voice trembling. "How did she know about the baby?" Wakin shook his head, his expression troubled. "I didn't tell her. Maybe she guessed, or I don't know, Faith. But I meant what I said. I'm here for you no matter what." Faith nodded, her heart racing. The gala continued, but the revelation hung over them, a shadow that refused to dissipate. As they danced under the rotunda, the music was a soft waltz. Faith leaned into Wakin, her voice a whisper. "I'm scared, Wakin, not just of Mom, but of us. What if we're moving too fast?" He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. "Then we'll slow down. But I'm not going anywhere, Faith. You and our baby, you're my home." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of love and uncertainty. Faith and Wakin spent their days preparing for the baby, attending doctor's appointments, and decorating a nursery in Faith's apartment. The nursery was a labor of love, soft yellow walls, a crib carved with stars, and a mobile that played a gentle lullaby. Wakin proved to be a steady presence, his humor easing Faith's fears, his thoughtfulness a constant reminder of his commitment. One evening, as they sat on Faith's balcony, the city lights twinkling below, Wakin pulled out a small box. Inside was a pendant, a delicate silver star encrusted with a single sapphire. "For you," he said, fastening it around her neck. "A reminder that you're my North Star, Faith. You guide me." Tears welled in her eyes, her fingers tracing the pendant. "You're making it hard to stay mad at you," she teased, her voice thick with emotion. "Good," he said, his smile radiant. "Because I'm planning something big and I need you on my side." Faith raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of big?" "You'll see," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Just trust me." The big turned out to be a surprise that took Faith's breath away. Wakin had arranged a private evening at the Griffith Observatory, its dome silhouette a beacon against the LA night. The observatory was closed to the public, but Wakin had pulled strings, likely through his old tech connections, to secure it for them. The planetarium was theirs alone, the ceiling a canvas of swirling stars, the air filled with the soft strains of a violin quartet playing Can't Help Falling in Love. Faith stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding as Wakin took her hand. "Faith," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I know we started this with a contract, a deal that was supposed to be simple. But you changed everything. You made me want to be better and the man you deserve. I love you and I love our baby. I want to build a life with you, not because of your mom or the money, but because you're my everything." He dropped to one knee, pulling a ring from his pocket, a simple band with a single diamond, radiant in its simplicity. "Faith Johnson, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Faith's cheeks, her laughter mingling with sobs. "This is so unfair," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm pregnant and emotional, and you're doing this under a sky full of stars." Wakin grinned, his eyes shining. "I had to make it count." "Yes," she said, her voice clear despite the tears. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, standing to pull her into a kiss that felt like a vow, a promise sealed under the stars. Prenny, hiding in the shadows with the violinists, burst out cheering and snapping photos. Even Doña Cora, secretly invited, stepped forward, her eyes misty with rare emotion. "I didn't expect this," Doña Cora said, her voice soft. "But I'm proud of you, Faith. And you, Daniel, you've surprised me." As they left the observatory, hand in hand, the city sprawling below, Faith felt a lightness she hadn't known was possible. The road ahead would be challenging: motherhood, marriage, her mother's expectations, but with Wakin by her side, she was ready to face it all, heart open and fearless. The Yosemite National Park stretched before Faith and Wakin like a cathedral of nature, its granite peaks piercing the twilight sky, its waterfalls whispering ancient lullabies. The air was crisp, scented with pine and possibility as they stood on a secluded overlook, the valley below a tapestry of emerald and gold. Faith's heart fluttered, her sapphire gown catching the last rays of the setting sun, her curls cascading in soft waves freed from their usual restraint. Wakin, in a tailored blazer and jeans, stood beside her, his blue eyes reflecting the starlight, a quiet intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. This was no ordinary evening. It was Wakin's surprise, a moment he'd promised would change everything. The week since the San Francisco Gala had been a whirlwind of love and preparation. Faith and Wakin had grown closer, their bond deepened by shared dreams and the quiet miracle of the life growing inside her. The pregnancy, now in its second trimester, was a secret they'd guarded carefully, but Faith's glow was undeniable, a radiant promise of the future they were building. Wakin had been a constant presence, attending doctor's appointments, painting the nursery, and leaving her handwritten notes that made her heart ache with their sincerity. Yet beneath the joy, Faith carried a lingering fear: could a love born from a transaction truly last? Wakin had insisted on a road trip tonight, his eyes sparkling with mischief as he'd driven them from Los Angeles to Yosemite. "Trust me," he'd said, his hand warm on hers as they wound through the Sierra Nevada. Now, as they stood on the overlook, a string quartet emerged from the shadows, their violins weaving a haunting rendition of "At Last." Faith's eyes widened, her pulse racing as she realized what was coming. "Wakin," she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. "What is this?" He turned to her, his smile a blend of nerves and certainty. "Faith Johnson," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You turned my world upside down. I thought I was helping you, helping my sister, but you showed me what it means to love someone completely. You're my partner, my muse, the mother of our child. I don't want to spend another day without you." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate band of white gold set with a diamond that caught the starlight like a captured wish. "Will you marry me, Faith? Not because of a deal or your mom or anything else, because I want to spend my life with you." Tears streamed down Faith's cheeks, her laughter mingling with sobs. The valley seemed to hold its breath, the stars above bearing witness to this moment. "You're impossible," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm pregnant, emotional, and you're doing this in the middle of Yosemite. How am I supposed to say no?" Wakin grinned, his eyes shining. "I was hoping you wouldn't." "Yes," she said, her voice clear despite the tears. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, standing to pull her into a kiss that felt like a vow, a promise sealed beneath a sky ablaze with stars. The quartet played on their music, a heartbeat that echoed through the valley. From the shadows, Prenny emerged, her camera flashing as she whooped with joy, her vibrant energy a perfect counterpoint to the moment's intimacy. To Faith's surprise, Doña Cora stepped forward too, her silver gown catching the moonlight, her eyes misty with an emotion she rarely showed. "I didn't expect this," Doña Cora said, her voice soft but steady. "But you've chosen well, Faith. Daniel, you've proven yourself." Faith's heart swelled. Her mother's approval was a rare gift. She squeezed Wakin's hand, her eyes never leaving his. "You planned this, didn't you?" she whispered, her voice teasing. Every detail, he admitted, his grin boyish. "Except for the part where you make me the luckiest man alive." As they returned to the waiting car, the quartet's music fading into the night, Faith felt a lightness she hadn't known was possible. The road to this moment had been fraught with doubt and deception, but here under the stars, she knew she'd found her home. The weeks that followed were a tapestry of love and anticipation. Faith and Wakin threw themselves into wedding plans, their days filled with laughter and late-night talks about their future. They chose a venue in Napa Valley, a vineyard estate that promised romance and grandeur, and Faith found herself dreaming of a life she'd once thought impossible, a life with Wakin, their child, and a love that felt like destiny. One afternoon, as they sat in the nursery surrounded by half-assembled furniture and fabric swatches, Wakin pulled out a sketchbook. "I've been working on something," he said, his voice shy. He flipped it open to reveal drawings of a mobile app interface designed to connect new parents with community resources. "It's rough, but I thought, maybe we could build this together for our kid and others like them." Faith's eyes welled up, her fingers tracing the sketches. "You're full of surprises," she said, her voice thick. "I love it. And I love you." He kissed her, his touch a promise of forever. But beneath the joy, Faith felt a flicker of unease. Doña Cora's approval had come too easily, her cryptic comments at the gala lingering like a shadow. Faith knew her mother, she was a strategist, always 3 steps ahead. What did she know that Faith didn't? The Napa Valley wedding was elegant, set against rolling hills and golden vines. Faith stood in a private suite, her gown a cascade of ivory lace, its train shimmering like moonlight. Her curls were adorned with delicate pearls, and the sapphire pendant Wakin had given her rested against her chest, a talisman of their love. Prenny, in a vibrant coral dress, fussed over her, adjusting her veil with a grin. "You're a vision," Prenny said, her eyes sparkling. "Wakin's going to lose it when he sees you." Faith laughed, her nerves dancing. "I hope so. I'm still getting used to this marriage, motherhood, all of it." Prenny squeezed her hand. "You've got this, Faith. You're building something beautiful." As Faith walked down the aisle, the vineyard stretching around her, she saw Wakin waiting at the altar, his eyes locked on hers. He wore a tailored tuxedo, his smile radiant, and for a moment, the world was just them. The ceremony was a blur of vows and tears, their words a tapestry of promises woven under the Napa sky. When they kissed, the guests cheered, Prenny whooped the loudest of all. At the reception, under a canopy of fairy lights, Faith and Wakin danced, their bodies swaying to a jazz band's soulful melody. "I can't believe we're here," Faith whispered, her head resting against his chest. Wakin's arms tightened around her. "Believe it," he said, his voice low. "You're my forever, Faith." As the night unfolded, Doña Cora approached, her expression softer than Faith had ever seen. "You've made me proud," she said, her voice quiet. "Both of you. This child, my grandchild, will carry our legacy, but more importantly, your love." Faith's eyes were misted, and her mother's words bridged years of tension. "Thank you, Mom," she said, her voice steady, "for letting me choose my path." Doña Cora nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "It's a good path, Faith." As the stars emerged, Faith and Wakin slipped away to a quiet corner of the vineyard, the night wrapping them in its embrace. "We did it," Faith said, her hand resting on her growing belly. "We're a family." Wakin kissed her, his lips warm and sure. "And we're just getting started." The San Francisco suburbs bloomed with the quiet beauty of spring, their tree-lined streets awash in pastel blossoms that danced in the breeze. Faith and Wakin's new home, a charming craftsman bungalow in a leafy enclave, was a haven of warmth and possibility. Its wraparound porch, adorned with rocking chairs and potted ferns, overlooked a garden where a golden retriever named Luna chased butterflies, her tail a blur of joy. Inside the house was alive with the soft coos of their newborn son Ethan, whose tiny starfish hands reached for the world from his crib, a mobile of stars spinning above him. Faith stood in the nursery, her curls loose and glowing in the morning light, her eyes soft as she watched Ethan sleep. Her wedding band glinted on her finger, a constant reminder of the vows she and Wakin had exchanged under the Napa Valley sky. The past year had been a journey of transformation, from the uncertainty of their beginnings to the radiant certainty of their family. Faith's startup had launched successfully, its app now connecting thousands to vital resources, while Wakin had returned to coding, his passion reignited by their shared dreams. Together they built a family and a legacy of love and impact. Wakin entered the nursery, his arms laden with a breakfast tray, freshly baked muffins, orange juice, and coffee that filled the air with its rich aroma. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans, his sandy blonde hair tousled from a morning walk with Luna. "Good morning, Mrs. Villarreal," he said, his voice warm as he set the tray on a side table. Faith smiled, her heart swelling at the sound of her new name. "You're spoiling me," she said, leaning in for a kiss. His lips were soft, familiar, a home she'd never expected to find. "Only the best for my wife," Wakin replied, his eyes twinkling. He glanced at Ethan, his expression softening. "And our little man. He's got your eyes, you know." Faith laughed, brushing a curl from her face. "And your stubborn streak." He's already refusing his bottle unless it's at the perfect temperature. They sat on the nursery's window seat, the morning light spilling over them like a blessing. Faith sipped her coffee, her thoughts drifting to the journey that had brought them here. The contract, the deception, the moment she'd seen those two pink lines, they seemed like fragments of another life, one she'd left behind for this. Yet there were moments when doubt crept in a whisper, asking if their love could withstand the weight of its unconventional start. Wakin, she said, her voice soft. Do you ever think about how we got here? The deal, the lies. Sometimes I wonder if we're too good to be true. He took her hand, his thumb tracing her ring. I think about it every day, he admitted. Not because I doubt us, but because I'm grateful. You took a chance on me, Faith, even when I didn't deserve it. That's not too good to be true, it's just true. Her eyes misted his words, a balm to her lingering fears. You're pretty good at this husband thing, she teased, leaning against him. I've got a great partner, he said, kissing her forehead. And a great kid. Their new life unfolded in a rhythm of love and discovery. Faith balanced motherhood with her career, her days filled with Zoom calls and diaper changes, while Wakin worked from a home office coding apps that complemented Faith's vision. They took Ethan on walks through the neighborhood, Luna bounding ahead, and hosted Prenny for impromptu barbecues, her laughter filling the garden. Doña Cora, now a doting grandmother, visited often, her once steely demeanor softened by Ethan's gummy smiles. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Ethan napping in a stroller, Prenny arrived with a tray of cupcakes and her usual flair for drama. Okay, you two, she said, plopping onto a lawn chair. I need the tea. How's married life? And don't skip the part where you're disgustingly in love, Faith laughed, tossing a napkin at her. It's perfect. Messy, exhausting, but perfect. Wakin grinned his arm around Faith. She's leaving out the part where I burn the pancakes every Sunday. Prenny smirked. Sounds like you need a cooking class, Daniel. Or should I stick with Wakin? Wakin's fine, he said, his eyes meeting Faith's. It's who I am to her. Faith's heart swelled, and the simplicity of his words was a reminder of their journey. They'd chosen each other not because of a contract or a legacy, but because of a love that had grown through trust and time. The first anniversary of their wedding arrived marked by a quiet celebration at their Napa Valley venue. The vineyard was as breathtaking as it had been on their wedding day, its vines heavy with grapes, the air warm with the promise of harvest. Faith wore a flowing white dress, her baby bump now a memory replaced by the joy of Ethan's presence. Wakin held their son in a linen suit, his eyes bright with pride. They renewed their vows in a private ceremony, just the three of them, with Prenny and Doña Cora as witnesses. Under a pergola draped in roses, Faith spoke first, her voice steady but thick with emotion. Wakin, I didn't expect you. I didn't expect us. But you've given me more than I ever dreamed, a family, a home, a love that feels like forever. I choose you every day. Wakin's eyes glistened, his voice low. Faith, you're my reason. For every line of code, every sunrise, every moment. You and Ethan are my world. I'll spend my life proving it. They kissed, Ethan cooed between them, and the vineyard seemed contented. Later, as they danced under the stars, Faith felt a peace she'd never known, a certainty that this was where she belonged. One evening, as they sat on their porch, Ethan asleep upstairs, Faith turned to Wakin, her voice soft. Do you remember when I offered you $10 million for this? She gestured to her belly, a playful smile on her lips. Wakin laughed, pulling her close. Best investment I ever made. But I got something better than money, you. She kissed him the night, wrapping them in its embrace. Think we could do it again? She teased, her eyes sparkling. Another baby. Wakin's grin was radiant. This time, no contract. Just us. They laughed, their voices mingling with the rustle of leaves, and Faith knew that their story, born from a deal forged in love, was only beginning.